I'm Scott Al Miller. It is Sunday night. This is Nicaragua Live, and we're doing an impromptu live stream because we can. That's my dog making some sounds there because I have been driving the entire day and I've had absolutely no time to do absolutely anything else. And so we're going to do a live because it gives us a chance to get things out there. Today's topic: why being a tourist has a tendency to lead people into being stuck in politics in a different way than they may be expecting. We think we're going to be very apolitical. We're going to be completely isolated from politics, and we may be apolitical, and that might be a good thing, right? We may really seek to be. Am I a lot more yellow than normal? I feel like I'm almost sepia. Is anybody noticing this? Just let me know. Diego's on. Hey. But what does reality really bring us to? And that is a big question, right? What are our roles and how are we affected by politics as expats? Because we do a lot of videos, and the first people are going to jump on and be like, Scott, look, you've done a number of videos, right? No opinion outside of this, just your videos say that as expats we have no right, we have no role. So like, look at this. This is yellow, right? That comes through in color. I've got, how white is this? See, this should be kind of white. It's definitely got a little bit of sepia going on. We still have color, but it's super sepia. My studio lights move themselves to 4,000 degrees. I don't know. Anyway, Carolyn Hook is here. Hey, Carolyn. So yeah, obviously we have this very important role to play as expats in taking ourselves out of local politics. Of course, we know it doesn't actually alleviate any duty we have to politics in our home country, right? That remains, right? We may be far less involved, we may be far less affected, but we still have a role to play there. That never really goes away. But as expats, we have this ability to be separate from politics, and in day-to-day life, it has nothing to do with us, right? We use Nicaragua as an example because I live here. That I, as an expat living in this country, how the politics work here is none of my business, right? Osprey Unlimited, greetings from Las Piñitas. Oh, Osprey, I was there minutes ago. I literally just walked in the door from the beach. And Mr. Bill, I hear that Nicaragua, and then he disappeared. It actually disappeared. It didn't get deleted the way that it normally would. It actually disappeared. That was weird. Reality, try to say super sepia 3 times fast. It would be funny. Super sepia, super sepia, super sepia. Super sepia. Mr. Bill, where did you go? It just vanished. Maybe he added something. Oh, on a different screen it says message retracted. Okay, on this one it just doesn't show it. That's weird. So we have this, and this is true anywhere, right? As an expat, we have this important role to play in keeping ourselves out of politics. We don't care about parties. We don't care about, as in political parties, we don't care about if or how they vote or anything like that, because it is our role to not be involved. Now that's to care, right? And to influence, which should be, you shouldn't be influencing something you don't care about. That should go hand in hand, but you kind of get the point. And that is true anywhere, right? It doesn't matter what country you're going to. It could be Nicaragua, it could be the United States, it could be Nigeria, it could be South Africa, it could be Thailand, right? It's not your place as an expat. It is the place of the people who are citizens, right? That is it's their country. You have your own. Now, if you become a citizen of that country over time, then it becomes your polity and it is your business, right? But as an expat, and we talk about this a lot, right? So I don't want to go into this in depth, but as an expat, it is your role. It's perfectly fine to be interested in a country. It would be, I see your post, Mr. Bill. I assume that you mean that as a joke because that makes no sense at all. Wherever you heard that from, as we will say, clearly is a source you should never speak to again, because they didn't respect you enough to even tell you a plausible story. But I assume it's just a joke to say we're talking politics and here's a funny thing that people say. Anyway, so the you still have this role to be aware of politics, to be wow, we're getting some interesting stuff. We're going to get to everybody. Don't worry, I'm not ignoring anyone. But there's a difference between being a observer of politics and an explainer of politics, and I think this is where. So I had a comment yesterday. Let's see where we're building to, right? I had a comment come in yesterday. I was like, Scott, love your channel. Thanks. But I love when you're giving tours, and we don't want your political opinion. So stick to what you're good at. Which was interesting because it was on my most popular live stream ever, which was one where we were talking politics. So he's basically saying, what you're doing that's getting all the views, we don't want to see that. That doesn't make any sense. I understand it's his personal opinion. This is why never give your personal opinions on a YouTube. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying I'm angry about it. I'm not saying I'm offended. Nothing like that. Just I've learned from being a YouTuber that I should never give that kind of opinion on a show because it makes no difference. Because the thing that people should do is either what they want to do, or if they're trying to satisfy their audience, what their audience wants. Now, if you're the only audience member, then, okay, explaining, well, okay, I like what you did, but this is how you could improve it. And I think offering some tweaks is valuable, right? If someone said, oh, you did this show, it was 25 minutes, but 24 and a half felt like where you should have wrapped up. I think you were, check to see, I think maybe you were losing audience at the end. Oh, I see. I did a thing where I got boring right there instead of reality where I'm boring the whole time. And that would be something like, check this, maybe remove the sepia. Let's add a little bit more color. I think that would be good. Those kinds of tweaks have value. Coming in and saying, okay, I like your show, except I'd like it to be a different show. Doesn't. And it's amazing how much that's the thing you get, right? Okay, I like your show, but the whole what you do on your show, I don't like that. So make it a different show. Imagine if you called up I Love Lucy and said, look, this whole sitcom thing you made, that's great. I love your show. But if you could make it a 60-minute long documentary, or interview show, that's what I actually want. Well, it doesn't matter what you want at that point. You're talking about a different show. And that's kind of where it comes in. So, but importantly, that's just something I've been wanting to say. Importantly, the show that we did yesterday was, it had my political opinion in it. I think that's clear, but that's going to happen. And it had the political opinion of a lot of people in the comments as well, and that's fine. The thing is that the importance of it is political analysis. And that's different than opinion, right? Certainly my opinion's in there. And certainly that's going to influence the way that I view, so that would be what we call bias, for my analysis. But it doesn't mean that my analysis is wrong, and it certainly doesn't mean that doing analysis isn't important, even for expats who are honestly trying to have nothing to do with the politics in the country that they are. Okay, so why? So here's the interesting thing, and the Venezuela situation yesterday highlights this in an important way. As an American, which I am, the amount that I'm isolated from the politics of the United States, living in the United States, is actually relatively high. Moving to a faraway country or a reasonably faraway country like Nicaragua creates an interesting paradox. And that is that the relationship between the United States and Venezuela, which if I'm an American living in the US, I can, unless I'm feeling a moral obligation to other people, which everyone should, of course, then I don't need to care because I'm not personally affected. But when I move out of the United States and live somewhere, it turns out I'm dramatically more impacted by the politics of the United States, even though I'm not living in it or near it or directly near someone that it's interacting with. And that same thing goes true, that I'm more impacted as an expat by the behaviors of the UK, of France, of several different countries. Suddenly, their politics impact me dramatically. And yes, at the moment, here in Nicaragua, nothing's going on. But it's important to understand, someone sent me a video of the puppet that the United States is trying to put in Venezuela. And that puppet is saying, as soon as she gets a hold of the resources of Venezuela, she's going to use them to end democracy in Nicaragua and to install a dictator, and to make it a colony, either of the U.S. or Venezuela. That part wasn't clear, but that they were going to colonize Nicaragua and relieve it of democracy, as they are doing in Venezuela, is a very key thing. She came right out and said it. This is my goal. Right, she was being put into that. This is how brazen you're able to be, right, these days. That's an amazing thing. But importantly, so importantly, what happened in Venezuela yesterday directly impacts us here. Creates fear, creates opportunity for risk, all kinds of potentially bad things. It doesn't affect us like we got up this morning and everything had changed, but it certainly already is a factor in your decision for moving here, investing here, leaving, whatever. All those things, this is now a factor because, one, the U.S. is actively promoting the tear down of democracies, which they always do, right? And installing things like communism and such. But we haven't seen that super recently, but the U.S. has tried to install communism in Nicaragua in the past, of course, right? And the U.S. being the strongest, not that it's communist, but the most communist country in the region. It's the strongest planned economy in the Western Hemisphere, possibly except for Cuba, but even there, you're really getting into which is the bigger planned economy. It's just the U.S. doesn't use communism in a socialist way. It's a non-socialist communism. It's a very strange animal. But which is because it's got an oligarchic undertone. But the history is basically the same, right? Authoritative right-wing governments with dictators put in place by the United States, taking countries, they basically only go after countries with functional democracies or republics, right? Which we were clear on the Expat channel yesterday, right? Technically, republics aren't democracies. You can't be both a republic and a democracy, right? But you can be kind of democratic. And that's the universally accepted. And someone was saying, well, what is a democratic country? And an example of an essentially one is Switzerland, right? They're not actually a republic. They actually have direct voting, but partially because they're very small. Their population is absolutely tiny. But they have direct rule. The people actually vote and they use majority. That's a democracy. And that doesn't make it good. Switzerland does a lot of bad things. So it's not that democracies are better than republics or vice versa. It's just important that we understand what they are and use the terms correctly because the U.S. works really hard to confuse people on what politics are in order to do things. So, it's all very interesting. But the important thing here is that we are now less isolated from global politics than we were. Diego says the people do not own the means of production. He means in the United States. That's not entirely true. So the government owns the means of production in the United States at a massive percentage. Second, I know of no country in the world where the government owns a larger percentage of the production. North Korea probably, but I don't really know, but I would assume so. But places like Russia, no. China, pretty sure not. But it's hard to say because there's in many of those countries, they're open about how much they own, we believe, but we don't know. They could be hiding a lot. And in the U.S., they hide it all, but they own almost everything. If you've ever owned a business in the United States, it becomes really clear really fast that, oh my gosh, everything is controlled by the government through, like, once you go, well, I'm not controlled by the government, my vendor or my customer is not controlled by the government, but then you realize that their customer and their vendor are controlled by the government, and that at the end of the day, the government controls nearly every penny and decision you make, but does so through very expensive high overhead proxies. Then you understand that the U.S. absolutely owns the means of production. The problem in the U.S. is, or the argument is, do the people actually have any say in the government? And so what you have is a government that owns the means of production. And in theory, it's a government of the people. So if you want to say that the people don't own the means of production, you have to say that the government is not representative of the people, which is fine. That's a fine thing to say is the case. And I'm not going to argue that it's not true. But any communist system, if you go look at Stalin's Russia or Stalin's USSR, did the people actually control the government, or did the government just control the means of production? And did that make it not communist? And is the entire then concept of communist, oh, wait, North Korea is not communist, right? Do we have to stop calling places communist because the people aren't actively controlling the government? That's fair. That's completely fair to say that all these examples that I've used don't qualify as communist. Fine. But then it's still following, it's a communist-based system with this disconnect, right? So we can accept that it's not communist, but we have to accept that that's what it's built around, right? The theory is the people control the government, and the government owns the means of production, therefore the people own the means of production, right? That's the concept behind communism, is that the people own the means of production generally via the government. If you only use the term people own the means of production, then capitalists would just do that, right? And then you have this like, well, who owns more production than capitalists, right? Well, nobody. Wait, are the capitalists the communists? Suddenly that becomes very confusing, right? So it's easy when you look at the U.S. to realize it's not actually capitalist, right? It's not a free market economy in the slightest. Therefore, calling it capitalist is obviously, right, just misdirection. It's anything but. China is far closer to a capitalist country than the U.S. is. Not to say that it is, right? The freedom of the market is not that high, but it's higher than the U.S. So it's a very interesting thing that we become caught in a need for understanding and being aware of and caring about politics as expats when we're the ones who are not supposed to be involved. But that's not quite true. So it's that we are not to be involved in the countries we are in, right? So for me, that's Nicaragua. I have no interest, no care as to the machinations of the local government, and no honest expat would, right? That makes no sense whatsoever. We can care about the results, and we can hope for the best for people. We can care about it empathetically for third-party people, right? And Jeff made a comment on the expats group yesterday. Boy, it's surprising that so many people in any place move to a country that they are idealistically opposed to and passionate about being opposed to the point where they are vocally angry about the choice that they made. So what a bizarre thing to care so much and yet choose that country. What possible reason would you have for that unless you just really actually love what that country does and just don't like having to admit it, right? Like there's some logic there, but it's a tough one, and he has a really good point. And so that feels like it goes in the face of what I'm saying, that expats can't care about politics. But the thing that we have to really say is, the bracket around that is, we can't care about the politics for ourselves. If we truly care about the people of a place and feel that a specific political situation is better for them, we can empathetically hope for the best for them. However, it is their choices and not ours. And so to want the best for them is one thing. To believe we know what is best for them is another. To attempt to use that to manipulate them to take control so that we can be that political entity to help is yet another thing. So it's important to understand where we fall in there and which things are correct and ethical and so forth. Mr. Bill hasn't responded, but Mr. Bill, I assume if you could give us just a thought that you were being tongue-in-cheek and didn't actually think that Nicaragua, and you don't actually know someone who thinks Nicaragua's communist, right? That's pretty extreme statement about the people you know if you think that they actually believe that. That they thought they could say it to you and you wouldn't call them out. Is a very common thing in the U.S., right? The U.S. has a culture where we do treasure honesty quite a bit, but we also really treasure not calling out obvious lies. I'm autistic, so I absolutely call it out, and I will say anyone who told you that is not someone you should ever speak to again, because they don't respect you at all. They think they see you coming, right? They're like, haha, either this guy will believe anything, or he won't just believe anything, but he won't call me out. So I can just say anything. And it's easily that this is just a test, right? How far can we push it? How obviously fake can we say something? Because it's so demonstrable, right? Any research on Nicaragua, there's no way you could think that it's communist, right? Now, it's not what Mr. Bill said, right? He said he heard, right? So he hears from a source he's now identified as being completely bunk, and not just bunk, right? But actively trying to manipulate him, whether it's to make him look foolish, whether it's to make him, do something, or to just test the waters to see how far they can push. Those kinds of things happen. But I assume you were just being silly because we're talking about politics. Janet says, see, it's funny. Tony says, Janet, I tried but can't. Not sure what. Oh, super sepia. Diego says, we're not that different from the rest of the region. And he points out to Mr. Bill that we're obviously a full free market economy here. We're far more capitalist than the United States. Because we actually have a free market economy for the most part. The amount of the production owned by the people is actually incredibly low, far lower than a China, far lower than the U.S. But it's not secretly held by proxy organizations, so it's way better. And then they have it's a socialist structure containing capitalism, right? So it's not unchecked capitalism, which would be a bad thing. It's a free market economy, which we associate with like you cannot hint at being capitalist without a free market economy. So the U.S., right, the most non-capitalist country you can think of. I know of no less free market economy, and moving to a place like Nicaragua and experiencing a decently free market economy is like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, oh, my restaurant's not doing well. That doesn't matter because that's not where the money's made. The question is, can I get a politician to fund my restaurant? And that sounds insane, right? Do politicians fund restaurants? I learned about this from being a restaurateur in New York and found out that the restaurant chain that I worked for wasn't profitable, but made wild amounts of money because they were money laundering for the New York State government. And that it was just a normal thing. And that tons of businesses were like this, that they had these fake fronts. And so basically the state would collect a bunch of taxes. The state wanted to do, and it turns out, reasonably good things with those taxes, but it couldn't get the people to vote for those things. So instead it used these weird grants and stuff to businesses saying one thing and then secretly having them do another. And they were literally laundering tax money, not for the purpose of stealing it. In this example, but it doesn't change the fact that in what was supposed to be a democracy-ish thing, New York State, it was the government basically said, the people are just too dumb, they're going to vote for the wrong thing, so we're going to take their tax money and do what we think is best with it, and then lie to them because they would definitely stop us if they found out. It's tough because I see their point, because the people were too dumb, and they did need to do some of that stuff, but they had to do really bad things. Not just the laundering, right? That was bad. And obviously government corruption is terrible, but they also had to create this massive overhead and waste all kinds of natural resources and do all kinds of unhealthy things and line the pockets of rich investors instead of putting the tax money where it needed to go. The tax money kind of got where it needed to go, but 50% of it or more also went to places we really didn't want it to go. In the process. That's one of the reasons why corruption is so bad in that case. Their end goal might have been good, but the ends were not nearly as good as they should have been. The means was obviously bad, but you can say the ends justify the means, and the ends do justify the means. But you have to include all the ends, and the biggest end was that the majority of the tax money that was collected that was meant to go somewhere good didn't, and actually went somewhere bad, propping up failed investors who were only able to be profitable because they participated in corruption and money laundering. So criminals got the majority of the money, and criminals in government got away with it, while painting it with this beautiful brush. Grandy Sabroso says, love and peace always wins. We hope that is true. I really do. Janet says, you are not, in reality, boring all the time, or maybe ever, but I'm trying to make the tongue twister longer. I'm up to Super Sepia silky socks or maybe something else. Osprey Unlimited says it used to be many years ago that Ponaleo was the place and Las Penitas was the sticks. Actually, when I was here 10, 11 years ago, that was the case. We were very surprised when we ended up in Las Penitas. We're like, but Ponaleo was the place. I'm going to jump back up to Flavia Brouillon. Hopefully, pronounce that kind of close. Is it true that China is once again trying to build a canal in Nicaragua? So that can't possibly be true because at no point in history has China ever tried to build a canal in Nicaragua. There's no such history. So starting at the historical point, is it trying to do it again? That will never be yes because never before. In some situations, people may be referring to, but only some, right? Because some people refer to a lot of things. We get about every 6 to 12 months a fake story from the U.S. that China's trying to build a canal. And here, no one even hears about it, right? This is purely for an American audience, maybe some European audience, but basically it's uniquely for Americans because only America feels that China doing good things is a bad thing. Everyone else in the world is like, I don't know if a canal makes sense, but China building a canal sounds fantastic, right? Every country on earth, Canada, Guatemala, Mexico, Brazil, Thailand, South Africa, Russia, everyone agrees China building useful global infrastructure is a sweet, sweet deal. And we know that China is very unlikely to do it if it isn't a good idea. Right? They could get it wrong. They're not perfect, but they're very likely to be doing it for global economic reasons, right? We're going to get food around the world. We're going to ship more Chinese-made cars around the world. Everyone wins. And more things are going to go to China as well. Everyone wins, right? Increase the global capacity. Just like if we said, what if we were to take away the Panama Canal? Who would lose? Everybody, right? Like, so putting in the Panama Canal, who wins? Everybody. There's some places that win a lot less, right? Chad, the Sudan, right? They're not really using the Panama Canal very much because they're not shipping and they're far away. They're like on the other side. They can ship either direction if they were to ship something, right? So some people who don't benefit very much, but basically the globe benefits by lowering the cost of getting stuff places. So if China was to put in a canal, we have to make the assumption that they're doing so because it's plausible and logical, and therefore it would then be assumed it would be good. So everybody should rejoice. And of course, Americans don't because they've been brainwashed that all things Asian are automatically bad, and that anything that benefits the globe is bad, right? So in the U.S., there's a regular stirring up of this weird fear that China's doing something good, except it's based on the additional completely insane assumption that it is possible or in any way logical to put a canal across Nicaragua. And while it is within the power of human engineering to do so, it is not easy enough to put a canal across Nicaragua or practical enough to consider it that no country, including China or Nicaragua or the United States, has ever in history commissioned an engineering study to even see what it would take. Not one, not ever. We have never gotten to the point where any entity has paid to figure out how to build a canal across Nicaragua. So that's how far we are from it, right? We're not even in the seriously thinking about it throughout history stage. Has anything happened in the last 15 years? Well, we'll say 10 years about the canal. Yes, there has been some movement. Very strong movement to put absolute nails in the coffin that there is absolutely no possibility of any canal ever. There was some fake, to be clear, items still on the books that some propagandists were using to claim there was a legal loophole to where someone could build a canal across Nicaragua. It was fake. It was not true at all. It was completely fabricated. But that became eventually annoying enough that the National Assembly of Nicaragua removed the underlying conditions that allowed it to be easier to attempt to create propaganda to claim that someone could consider building a canal. They had given up saying someone was going to, because that eventually became well enough known that no one was going to do it. So, no, China is not looking at a canal, is not considering a canal, never has. The thing that some people point to is a guy from China once ran a finance scam where he tried to get money from investors by claiming he was building a canal. At no point was China ever involved. The guy was Chinese. That is the same as like if I today said, hey guys, I want to raise some money to build a canal. Not for anybody, for me. Or, I'm it's going to run it as a business for me and my investors. We're going to build a canal across Honduras. And I'd like to get a number of investors to put in about 10 million each, right? I could make that announcement on this live stream, and it's just me, just a guy saying I'd like to make money for this idea. You could take that and run that in the United States newspapers and say, prominent American political activist is representing the U.S. government in the creation of a canal across Honduras. It'd be completely false. I'm not a political activist. I don't live in Honduras. I don't have access to that. I don't have a permit to do that. I don't have any actual investors. I just brought up the idea. I don't represent the U.S. government. The U.S. government isn't doing anything. The U.S. isn't even aware that I'm talking about it. Right? But that's the kind of thing that would end up in the news. That's what people would do. That's where fake news comes from, is things like that. So that's what happened. Right, a guy who had no legitimacy, had no money, had no anything actually real happen, managed to get enough money to at least get an audience, and managed to buy a license or a permit or whatever that allowed for a set period of time him to attempt to put together a company, to attempt to do this. So he got some rights, like if he can meet a bunch of things, well, then maybe he'd be able to build a canal. He didn't meet those needs, so he never had a license to build a canal. And there's that. That thing is what people use to say China's trying to build a canal, right? So, no. And you can safely assume that no one saying China's building a canal will ever actually be China building a canal. They could. China has the money, they have the engineering resources, but importantly, they have no reason to do it. Makes no sense at all. Doesn't make sense. Long ago, when there wasn't a Panama Canal, it didn't make sense. When there wasn't the larger Panama Canal, it didn't. We didn't do it all those times. All these countries who've had an interest didn't do it. Right? Why didn't they do it? Because it didn't make sense. And now that China and its partners like Mexico have dry canals or railroads across their countries, right? And the U.S. has a canal, right? The U.S. has had a dry canal since the 1850s, 1860s, I can't remember. There just isn't the value. Would another Panama Canal be handy? Yes. Ships are very handy, but not nearly as handy as they used to be. Our ability to ship across the countries on rail is so good. And even that we're rarely building. But Mexico just put one in, and that has alleviated a lot of the pressure on the Panama Canal. And the global contraction has relieved a lot of pressure on the Panama Canal. So the factors that would make anybody consider putting any additional canal anywhere have just gone down so much. So to be like, when it was almost feasible, they didn't do it. To say now that it's nowhere close to feasible that they're going to do it doesn't, like, China does logical things, right? As a country, at least. Nick Alberto, it almost feels like a Hollywood show, like people are acting. What raises suspicion is that Venezuela didn't fight back at all, which makes me wonder if there's something we're not being told. That's plausible, but I think you'll find there isn't a lot of opportunity to fight back because it's not a ground invasion, right? It's just a couple of abductors sneak in, throw a bag over someone's head, and sneak out, right? What is Venezuela going to do? They may not know it's happening. You know, special forces in any country can do an awful lot, right? Because, for example, if you think about like the Oklahoma City bombing, why didn't the U.S. fight back? Right. Well, because there was one guy with a bomb. By the time they knew what was going on, it was too late. There was no one to go after. Right. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about in Caracas. Getting one bomb off sucks, but how was Venezuela to see it coming? Maybe they could, maybe they did, but I doubt it. It's reasonable that they didn't or didn't have the ability to stop it, and that a large number, but still just special forces, was able to sneak in and nab somebody isn't something that you can easily fight back against. Now, if you caught them on the street and you had some military, but we're talking about people running in, grabbing someone, throwing them in a car, running, like think about, you know, James Bond or something. I know that's fantasy for the most part, but like GoldenEye was real, right? And directed by Ian Fleming, and I don't mean the movie. But your sorry, just something interesting popped up. But your ability to potentially do that with actual real special forces with just ungodly amounts of funding is pretty high, right? If you think about it, this is the same team that got Osama bin Laden. Is it super impressive that they got him? No, right? He had no resources. He was hiding in a cave or whatever. Like, that we didn't get him for so long is actually pretty shocking, given the resources at hand. So, you know, that this took years and years and years to be able to get Maduro when they've been trying to kidnap him. You know, Nico Bocha says, but anyhow, hi Scott, nice to see you. It's always good seeing you. Just wanted to say hello and hope everything's okay. I've been learning a lot here in Nicaragua about how things operate. Yeah, I bet. See, I love your explanations. You could be the best lawyer in the world. I would hate being a lawyer. It would drive me crazy. But thank you. Janet says, I think the thing is that in 2014, when I arrived, the Las Piñitas side was being developed by expats more, and Ponaloy is that traditional Leon side that isn't owned by the indigenous community. Yeah, it's weird how they're split in the way that it is. Definitely when I was here in 2015, 1 year later, Ponaloya was everything, and we didn't see anything in Las Piñitas. She says, and I think that more expats saw how nice the beach was in Las Piñitas and were happy to work with the local community, while the Ponaloya side had been developed for ages and ages. It's true, everything over there is very old. Diego says, the thing with that guy is that the government took him seriously. I remember seeing El Bachi in a meeting with him. I don't know how much the government took him seriously. So Diego, you're right. The government took him seriously, but you have to look at it in context. And maybe they truly believed he was going to build a canal, but I don't think that that's the case. I think they were hopeful that he might, but they were at early stages. If you look at like where he was going to put the canal and stuff, like, no, I don't believe they took him seriously in that regard. That makes no sense. No, none at all. I just can't believe that. What I think they saw was the opportunity for there to be a lot of development money to come in, and so their hope was that they were taking him seriously as a salesman. They didn't need a canal to be built or even to be started for it to do what they wanted to do at the time, which was get attention. There's a lot more potential value. For example, why do entities keep bringing up the canal when it's so clearly senseless? Right? Like, something's clearly wrong. Why do people keep bringing it up? Well, it's because it creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the United States. It can trigger investment. It could trigger any type of investment. You might find, for example, if you own a bunch of land in the Nicaraguan jungle, you could say, I'm working with a Chinese guy who represents China, right? He doesn't, but how does anyone know? You can't call up the Chinese government and go, hey, does this guy who says he represents China actually represent China? No, it's just some third-generation American who kind of looks Chinese, and his family, his cousin owns a Chinese restaurant, is just enough to trick Americans that other Americans that he's somehow Chinese, and he just goes around And the hope is that he can just raise money. And so maybe he raises a little bit of money from people who are like, I'm going to invest in him. But what he actually is doing is he's giving a fake map of where he has concessions in Nicaragua. And he gets American investors who are scared and are told by their government that China doing things is anything good for Nicaragua, anything good for China, anything good for the world is bad for Americans. And so Americans are like, oh, I know I'm going to do my patriotic duty and I'm going to go into the jungle of Nicaragua and I'm going to go to where this guy's saying he's going to build and I'm going to buy the land and I'm going to either force them to buy at high prices or I'm going to stop them from building the canal by not selling or I'm going to force the government to seize it for me and I'll go in the news and tell them the land was seized because I can't get any actual seizure, so I'll force one, right? And then at least it'll look bad on the world stage. They had to steal my land, right? And then they get people to pay insane gringo prices, 20, 30, 100 times the actual value of the land, and then just go, idiot, it's jungle. We don't care. You're not going to build something there. We weren't going to build something there. You just put $100 million into the system, buying all this land across this fake route, and all of that money went into somebody's coffers, right? And we know you're going to abandon the land, and we're going to go squat on it in 100 years, and it's going to disappear. You're not going to pay to protect that land in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to come down and develop on it. You're never going to come, right? And so there's a pretty good, like, we can somehow raise $100 million right now and lose nothing in the long run, right? Kind of mentality that can happen with that kind of long con. And so I think that's what you're seeing is this combination of just probably stirring up investors to get money moving or to get in the public eye or to make some international attention or whatever. And so you can take him seriously without taking the canal seriously. Even without taking him seriously as a businessman, he didn't have to be legit to be a seriously useful person. Derek Clark says Trump is still a game show host in my eyes. Sadly, it is one of those dystopian future game shows like Running Man. But yes. KL7RRC, hola, Scott from Washington. Flavia Brolion says, Scott, you are my CNN in Nicaragua. I think that's good. I am your Internet News Network, INN. So I found it very interesting this week, just to experience this overall situation where being non-political here doesn't save you from being completely impacted by the politics even far away. And in our case, being much more impacted by the politics of our home country than we ever were in our home country. That's something you don't expect, that by leaving. And I am removing some people from the channel for glorifying terrorism. Just letting you guys know. Someone said, unsubscribe now from being your follower for over a year. Look, if you support terrorism and you're leaving because I don't, like, great. I'm sorry, guys. Like, you know, it's a tough one. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, I think. And we're having this tough conversation. It wasn't about politics. It was about people being dishonest, right? And he was like, well, so someone lied to your face and then doubled down on the lie and then got their spouse to come in and he's like, well, when do you cut people off? When do you, like, he's like, yeah, you should sit down and talk to them about this. I'm like, why? Like, they're bad people. This wasn't a fight or flight response, because he was trying to be like, you know, they got caught lying in public and this was their response. I'm like, this happened over a period of hours, right? At some point, it's best to cut people out of your lives. And it's funny. Someone's like, oh, your videos now are going to be your biggest loss. You're going to lose 75% of your viewers. Interesting. It was my biggest day ever. Very, very odd. I don't know. So don't want to get into all the negative on the channel because there's actually very little of it. I'm actually really happy. I'm just trying to go through because I wanted to answer Seeking Truth, who asked on an HVAC opportunities analysis in Nicaragua. And I'm only doing this on the live stream because I wanted an opportunity to answer this. And I don't know how many live streams I'm doing in the immediate future. And it's not worth an entire video, basically, right? So once in a while I do this, and you guys aren't asking a question currently, so that's why I popped over to do it. We're at the 47-minute mark. And I'll just post that. I try to get through these questions. So he asked, are any other trades in demand in Nicaragua? We're talking about HVAC opportunities analysis in Nicaragua was the episode. And in that episode, we talked about why there aren't HVAC opportunities. And so for Seeking Truth, the answer is no. There is no trade that is in demand in Nicaragua. We have a massive unemployment problem, and we're not going to get into the politics of why that is, but our number one crisis, other than being overthrown and being openly threatened by Venezuela now, or by a puppet that is going to be put into position in Venezuela. That is seriously concerning, that we have been openly threatened for being colonized. Oh, Diego, I saw that question the other day. I'm going to get to it in a second. But we have an unemployment crisis, as in there's too many people unemployed. It's the only reason that any number of people leave the country, right? Either for employment or for better employment, but employment, right? Nobody ever leaves. I've never heard of a person leaving for another reason. Obviously, someone does. Someone just goes, you know what, I like snow, and they're out of here, right? Because there isn't any. But in the real world, I've never spoken to a person. I've never heard of someone speak to a person who left for any other reason. Sure, there's Americans who claim that they're Nicaraguans and left for other reasons, but when you actually dig in, are like, okay, when did you leave? Well, okay, what do you give us some details? And they never know, right? It's always this. Given that, it's easy to see that there's no way there's going to be a trade in demand, right? Beyond the fact that no trade is going to qualify for a visa, ignore that, right? That's a separate problem. You're never going to be able to work here, period. We shouldn't be asking the question. We're looking in the wrong places. We're doing the wrong thing. But that's one problem. And there's no chance that you will ever find a trade where, if you're coming in from outside, that you would want to earn the local salary. That is impossible. I've never heard of it happening. I've never heard of a scenario that came close enough that it was worth discussing, right? It's so absurd to think that that would happen. That's never going to happen. So you'll never accept a job here, even if one was offered to you. And one will never be offered to you because of the first problem, right? So we got these two problems. You'll never get an offer. No offer you could ever get would you accept. Ignore both of those things. There is never going to be a shortage of trades here until the economy completely changes and there is no longer an unemployment shortage or an employment shortage causing unemployment. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber, an electrician, in HVAC, auto mechanic, plane mechanic, boat mechanic, fisherman, butcher, grocer, baker, right? Furniture maker, horse husbandry, whatever it's called, dentist, doctor, lawyer, and we're getting into things we don't generally call trades, but any of them, right? The number of people available to do those jobs in every single role is greater than the number of people needed for those roles. And the number of people available to learn any one of those skills is, in a practical sense, unlimited. So let's just take an example. Let's say that we need more people who are expert horse dentists. Real thing. Knew a guy in the US, that's what he did. Good money in the US. What if you can't find enough of those in Nicaragua? Almost immediately someone becomes one. Because if there's an opening, someone will fill it. Someone is skilled and smart and has the energy and the will to feed his family. Because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about not having a job and not putting food on the table versus having a job and putting food on the table. And if it's a job that's in demand, well, it's going to pay more, maybe not a ton, but more than some not in demand job. So instantly, this is a market, as most are, that fills those demands. But this one, it's so dramatic what the unemployment is that it will fill any demand every time, right? If you could find a trade that doesn't have excess people working in it, if you could identify that, the Nicaraguans can identify that, and Nicaraguans would create the surplus. Because if you have nothing else to do, if you're completely unemployed, let's say we managed to identify that the number of plumbers in Nicaragua was only just enough to meet the demand. There's no extra, there's no open job, but there's also no extra person. Then a number of people will make a point of becoming plumbers because they know someone could die, someone might retire early, someone might not be very good at it and they'll take their job away, and so forth. That would immediately identify an opportunity for a Nicaraguan who is ambitious in any way, who really wants to put food on the table, to go after someone who maybe is just interested in retiring early. You know, I wasn't going to. I wanted to serve my community, but this guy wants to take over. I'll retire in a year early, 2 years early, whatever. You can see that stuff happening. You only need one person to do it to fix all these things. And so it's just something that, because it's a free market economy, right, and even places that are controlled, that, like we talked about, still would have this happen. If you are desperate for work, you will gravitate to what gives you the opportunity to work. So that is all right. Eliminating some of these nasty people from the channel. This is, it's interesting. It's interesting to me that there's a number of people who are, so that's why the unemployment thing. So back to the political thing, and to Jeff's comments in the expat group, the number of people who are posting things in the YouTube that, if this was seen, they're like, I'm moving to Nicaragua and I'm so disgusted that you support Nicaragua. Do do you think that um, do you think that that's going to work out well for you? And he's like, I sure hope I don't run into you when I move there. Well, first of all, I certainly hope I don't run into fascist when you move here, right? Like, I don't want nasty people who are claiming they're coming here to colonize and to harm the country to be someone I run into. But also, very importantly, a whole number of people are commenting on his stuff and like pointing things out. You know, if you were to say this in reverse, right? If it was a Nicaraguan was going to move to the United States and posted a whole bunch of things about how they hoped that terrible things happen to Americans and how they hate the country and how they want to take it over militarily and destroy the economy. You say those things and then you go and they're like, you know, we need to see 5 years of your social media. They're going to go, you know what? We're gonna turn you away. Sorry, like, and they should, right? Like that just makes sense. Pretty much any country would. So someone who claims that they want to move to Nicaragua, this is an extreme case of Jeff's example. Oh, Seeking Truth is here. Woohoo! Okay, we're going to get into his stuff in a second. For someone to claim their goal is to move here and to be willing to post publicly, and this is Jeff's point. It's one thing to have opinions, right? You hate Nicaragua, but you're poor and you're just hoping to take advantage of the financial situation. You really love the terrible things that are happening around the world, and you want to support them, and you know that will get you in trouble most places in the world. But you just keep quiet because you want good things to happen for you, right? You want to take advantage of the countries that you dislike the countries. Right? So this is the funny thing about this guy, John Doe, who was just posting. That's his John Doe NH7BB, right? He wants... Oh, I got to open the door for the dog. Right. So to Jeff's point was like, why would you have these feelings and move to the country? That's a stretch, but we can make a case for it. But why would you have the desire to move to this country and vocally cut yourself off at the knees, right? Everyone on the channel can see this, including the government who watches my channel. If someone ran into you, we could just be like, oh, you're that guy. I got a copy of the stuff you said. Here we got some screenshots. We're going to send them to the police. So here in Nicaragua, police and migración, which would be the equivalent of ICE in the United States, is one department, right? So you can just go to your local police department and be like, I have got some stuff of this guy threatening the country publicly. So you can look him up. This is who he is. And it's that guy, right? And they will just go, right? So unlike the U.S., who gets all your history at the border, they would never let you in. Here, there's a decent chance you would get in. But if any of us who are actually here are like, hey, do you know you got someone threatening all of us here? They'd be like, oh, hell no. No. And are they going to go round him up? No. They're going to go pull his passport. They're going to go, that guy, yep, that's him. And they're just going to put a note in the system that says no renewal. And when he does a border run, they're going to go, sorry, you're staying in Costa Rica. And you'd better hope that Costa Rica wants you, because we're going to send a copy of this to Costa Rica, right? And Costa Rica is not going to be favorable when you're out there saying, you know, that brown people should be eliminated and they're just property of white people. That's not something that goes over well, even in countries that lean towards being favorable with the U.S. Their being nice to Americans does not go so far as letting in people who threaten them. But yeah, it's a weird thing to post publicly. Now, Richard Johansson just said, I'm starting to think maybe some of these people are AI trolls, make these comments, if that's a thing yet. That is absolutely a thing. I don't know if these guys are, but that AI makes trolling comments is a huge thing at this point. These people are people who, or these accounts are ones, both of them are ones that have posted a lot over the years. What worries me is the number of people who, which is not a very high number, but that it's any number, of people who are like, oh, I thought Scott was a piece of shit. And it turns out he's a nice guy. Oh, I'm effing this channel, right? And I'm like, are you angry because I'm a good guy? Like, I do a lot of crappy stuff. Like, I'm, right? Someone's gonna be like, I've met Scott. He's kind of a jerk. I'll own it. It could be the case. In this situation, right? I know that they're responding to me being a nice guy. And it's like, wow, what a thing to go out and be angry about and to post publicly about. Like, do you expect me to, like, you're such a nice guy, I hate you. Okay, good. Well, whoever you are, I'm glad you hate me for being good. It would really suck if you hated me for me doing something bad. Then I'd feel bad. Now I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad for you either. Bye. Right? Like, what a weird thing. Like, just the reaction that people have is so strange. Yeah, it's weird. Cool. Someone did ask, oh, these are tough. What is the average cost per square meter building cost are? Oh, it's so wildly different. It's so hard to gauge. I did skip over Diego, and I promised I wouldn't. Diego, what camera do you use for YouTubing? Well, it depends. For my normal everyday YouTubing, when you see me outside, that is a GoPro 13. Do I have it at hand? I don't. I set it out of reach. But that is what I use most days. It's just simple. Like, audio quality is great, image quality is great, ease of use is fantastic. You can just run around with it and get great footage and be an idiot, right? Oh my gosh, I didn't hold it steady. It is going to, like, even out the image quite a bit. I try really hard not to do that, but sometimes I make big mistakes with the camera and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm on the GoPro, no one's going to notice. And I know you guys notice, but you don't notice as much. If I was on this and I was running around being stupid, you'd be like, this looks terrible, what are you doing? So the GoPro makes it easy and fast, and the biggest deal for me is that the GoPro subscription gives me unlimited storage online for my GoPro footage, which means I get to upload unlimited amounts of stuff and have it backed up and protected, which completely changes the game. Otherwise things would get really, really costly and difficult. So it solves a lot of things for me. One of our people has dengue, and Marcella's like, oh my gosh, did he go to the hospital? I'm like, who goes to the hospital for dengue? It just sucks. Just, you lay in bed and you suffer. At least that's what I did. It worked. Anyway, and so the GoPro 13 I really swear by, and obviously you could use an 11 or a 12 as well. A 10 is more or less okay. 9, I think you don't want to go back that far. You could, but if you're going to be doing YouTube, the 11, 12, and 13, the 13 does have a pretty good leap, and they didn't make a 14 this year, so the 13 is actually a little bit old. But I've had the 4, 5, 2 9s, 11, 12, and 13. I sold my 9 and my 5, and my 4 just, I don't know, got broken or something. And one of my 9s got stolen. So I still maintain an 11 as a backup, and I use a 12 and a 13 every day, and they make life good, right? So that I swear by. I play around with 360 cams. They're fun. They can do the job, but they're a lot more work, a lot more cost. I have some mini cams like the Go 3. Love it. It's so much fun. Do I ever use it for the show? Nope. It's just a cool camera. So I wouldn't buy one for a show. If it was your only camera, again, you could make it work, but I wouldn't do that as my only camera. I'm not going to do it again, I don't think. And again, I love it. I've gotten other people to buy them because they're so nice, but for me, it's really just a gimmick, and it just isn't. Diego says you go to the hospital for dengue because you don't know if it's normal dengue or dangerous dengue. Does the hospital know the difference? I think they just ride it out too, right? They don't have a treatment for it. So what are they going to do? I mean, if you get worse, you go in for treatment, but I mean, seriously, what are they going to do? I'm going to ask. My doctor's not online, or I'd ask her. Richard Johansson said, some of these people making those comments don't seem real as soon as you ask them any questions. Here's the problem I have with that, is that people I know in real life don't often, like 50% of them sound worse than AI once you start asking them any questions. And I had a guy relatively recently that had the same effect happen in real life. Like, he fell apart and responded like a hallucinating AI. I was standing in front of him, right? Like, I don't know if just being in the life position that I am, that I'm suddenly running into a lot more people who can't hold basic conversations down. And I understand being with like we've talked about the self-selection of expats and who you end up with in different scenarios. And like, this was a right. No, I do know about hemorrhagic, and we were asking about that, but I think, isn't there ways to tell? I'm gonna ask. I'm not asking AI, just in case someone is like, he's asking AI. No, I am not. I do not want to see an AI overview. No one has ever, in the history of the world, said, it'd be handy, an AI overview. AI overviews for when you ask the question but don't care if the answer is right. Okay, so the things that you get for hemorrhagic: severe abdominal pain, persistent vomiting, marked change in temperature. That is a little bit tough because you do get really severe fever with the regular one. Easy bruising, bleeding from nose or gums, bleeding from internal organs, just in case you happen to notice your spleen bleeding. Throwing up blood or blood and stool, frequent vomiting. I think they already covered that. Thanks, Medicine Net. Extreme tiredness, irritability, or restlessness. Yeah, none of those he has. I'm looking at the CDC, not that they have anything anymore. Oh, useless. As kind of expected. Diego says, does AI just sound like most human beings? Is it trained on us after all? Absolutely, Diego. That is the thing, is that AI actually sounds like average humans. That's why I think the biggest thing that AI is doing for us is exposing us to what reality is. When real humans did these things, we excused them. We're like, oh, they're distracted. Oh, they're drunk. Oh, they're, they've been injured and have mental deficiencies. Oh, it must be someone who's got dementia. It must be. And then when you actually look at the behavior of AI and then go, wait a minute. If I didn't know this was AI, is this behaving exactly like one of my employees? Is this acting exactly like someone I randomly engage with on Reddit? And then you're like, oh my gosh, it is. And not just current ones that could be AI, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you start going, oh my gosh, people really do mostly just string words together to sound good. And when you start actually digging into things that people have said or opinions that they have, or for example, what's the difference between AI hallucinations and many conspiracy theories, right? Every time someone says chemtrails, that's just a hallucination, right? That's just some not AI, hallucinated some really weird thing that makes no sense at all. And now other eyes and some AIs have heard about it from this hallucination and are building on this hallucination and repeating it without understanding the context. So we talk about AI and say, well, the problem with AI is it doesn't actually know what you said, right? You say, why is the sky blue? It doesn't know why the sky is blue. It doesn't even know what the sky is. But it looks at human behavior over time and says, when someone asks these strings of words, what string of words is statistically likely to come after it? And often it sounds quite reasonable. And sometimes it sounds like gibberish. So the thing is that if you take real humans and do the same thing, you realize that the gibberish rate is surprisingly close. Much like this conversation I had yesterday with people I know are real and other people I know are real. And people looked at the conversation, and the reality is that the responses were like AI slop. They were incoherent. And I know it was multiple real people taking long periods of time to consider what they were going to say, and they still could not produce contextually relevant statements. So they failed at sounding reasonable. They did form complete sentences, but they, when you read them, didn't mean what you would like. They didn't make sense. There was a lack of intelligence behind it, which is the problem with AI. AI has exposed not that AI is slop, but that many human responses absolutely lack intelligence and are just slop. And psychologists have known this for a long time, that tons of things that people say is garbage, right? Their mouths just run. Parts of their brain that are non-conscious are putting words together and trying to respond because they're trying to do it with minimal effort or whatever. These things are well known, and so that's, that people repeat this stuff, and they don't think about what they're saying. In this case, they started saying things that had huge ramifications, and I don't think they were thinking about it. They just wanted to lie, right? They were obsessed with disrespecting the people in the room, to the point where they weren't thinking about just how what they said sounded. They were thinking, well, it's a minor lie, and we just don't respect the other people in the room. But it was stating that the value of respecting people was low to zero was an interesting one. That they were just like, why would telling the truth matter? Because and an important thing that I came up with, right? Truth is an artifact of people respecting each other. When you respect someone, you want to tell them the truth. We're all going to slip up sometimes. Let's be clear. People lie. Humans lie. Partially because parts of our brain that are non-conscious respond faster than we can stop and say, do we want to lie in this situation? And faster than we can say, is that a lie in this situation? Right? Did you take out the garbage today? I did. Did I? Shit. Why did I do that? Why didn't I stop and think? Because I didn't care very much, or I was distracted, or my brain just did that, right? But did I take out the garbage? I may not have. The correct thing to do right there is really quickly run and take out the garbage, so that when they go, I checked, you did take out the garbage. Oh, good. I wasn't 100% sure, but I thought I did. No, the correct response is, wait, no, I don't think I did. Hold on. But but back to Diego. So the GoPro is what I use for outdoor stuff almost all the time. I do really like the DJI Pocket 3. It's a lot more work to use, but produces some really good results. It depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to be a talking head and your face is the main subject, the DJI is going to reign supreme. If your goal is the background or scenery, then the GoPro is going to come in really, really well. So you'll notice if I use the Pocket, which is very rare, my background is blurry. That's not this when we're outside. And when the background is crisp, that's the GoPro. Since I'm generally showing you where I am, the GoPro makes more sense. I realize everyone knows my head is on the image just way too often. I'm sorry. But at least we are attempting to get the camera to focus on the right thing. Now, if you're asking what I'm doing in the studio, I'm always using a Fuji XS20. Absolutely fantastic. Cannot rave enough about this camera. It's also the same one we use for filming Nicaragua. So if you're looking at those concert videos and you're like, holy crap, they're getting amazing concert footage. How are we doing that? Fuji, once again. Could we match that with a high-end Nikon, for example? Yes, but it double, triple the cost. If we went really, really high, we could get better, but it's very hard to do so. If you're looking at my photography, that's generally one of these. I've got 4 DSLRs, all Nikons, that I use for performance photography at night. I hope to get a few more. That stuff is quite popular. It has turned out really well. Get a lot of really good feedback on the work we do with that, so I'm very happy with those. And I've been a Nikon user for a really long time, so I enjoy having a collection of Nikon cameras, even though my Fuji's my main workhorse. And speaking of, I'm uploading some of those footage from some concerts right now. Got another one that we did just this past Friday night. Roger Funk came out and joined us. Janet was there. Alberta Boy was there. Had a good time. I'm going to get to the other things in a second. Make sure these upload. 113 new photos uploading right now. I'm a bit of a camera nerd. Did I miss anything? 2001, Expats, Beach. Thing that guy, game show host, CNN, what camera? Seeking True says, how's the tech industry in Nicaragua? I imagine it's not that great. So Diego is aware of it as well. It's not great. It's neither is there a large employment base for tech, nor is there a large educational base for tech, nor is there a lot of trained technical people. There is some. My company operates here as an example, and we hire in country, but not a lot. And it's a tough hiring market. Software engineering has way more presence here, as is the case in most places. It's much easier to teach software engineering than IT, and so a lot of lower income or struggling education environments, like a lot of Latin America, a lot of smaller countries, a lot of the U.S. South, they'll not teach IT at all. There's no public school in Texas that teaches IT, for example, but they teach software engineering at a not very good level almost everywhere, right? Very cheap to teach how to code because it's a very demonstrable skill. Like, did you write these words? Did you meet these goals? Did you do this thing? It's a lot easier to teach. IT is very how to consider, how to think, how to evaluate, how to talk to people. It's a much softer thing that has a lot higher fail rate and has no good way to judge it. And the only way to judge it is to have really good people that are able to do that judging. So you can't teach it from a book. You can't teach it from AI. Whereas software engineering, you don't have to actually know how to program to teach it. It would help a lot. You will suck as a teacher, but you can evaluate as long as people aren't cheating, and you can generally tell that people are cheating by watching them and say, can you make it do this thing? That works for software engineering for the most part. It doesn't mean you're going to get a great teacher. It doesn't mean you're going to learn important values like why does test first development have advantages? Why is pair programming sometimes more efficient than individual programming? Why do we use source control and other things? And what are industry norms? Those are all things you'll often not be able to get from normal software engineering programs because they don't have people who understand them, but you can at least gauge the basics. But in IT, you can't. You can only gauge bench skills, which are not actually IT. So some places end up teaching bench instead of IT and just hide it. Most places teach software engineering and call it IT and try to pretend that they taught something that they didn't. So same struggles here. They don't do that. They just don't have IT programs. I've looked. We've never found an IT program in the country. And it does show that there's neither a formal education program to get people into IT, nor is there any kind of career path within the country for people to move up. So if you get into IT here, you're going to find a complete lack of mentors. You're going to find there's no ladder, a development ladder. There's very few resources for like, okay, I'm studying operating systems. I want to study databases. You're going to be like, nobody knows anything right now. Of course, you can go online and teach yourself, but you're in the same boat as anybody with an internet connection and no resources beyond that. Sure, you can completely teach yourself IT online, but having that as something you can do is very tough and to actually take advantage of. And companies here are not prepared in the slightest to evaluate or want to hire qualified IT people. And so you could go out and become an amazing IT person, and people will hire people who are completely unskilled over you because they don't have the first clue how to evaluate it, and will do the exact opposite, which much of the US does as well, which is why the average company in the US who pays a person with IT in their title has no IT practitioner on their staff. Right? The average person taking the title in the US doesn't work in the field. That's crazy, right? So the same thing happens here on a grander scale, that there's just no knowledge at all. Janet says, I think this is, well, I gotta scroll. Not working there. Janet says, my doctor did a blood test and monitored the hemorrhagic. He was concerned about the level of something in my blood, but it was okay in the end at home the whole time. Expats is here. A month staying in a hostel in Leon runs between $250 and $450. That sounds reasonable. You definitely get a deal in a hostel. So, if you were to take their per day rate and add it up, it would be more. And generally, you can opt out of breakfast or something. Be like, oh, do you provide breakfast? I don't need that, right? And maybe pay even less if they can monitor that and stuff. Expats says, yeah, you can prompt it to act like that too, of course. Seeking Truth says, I used to believe chemtrails until I actually did research. Sure, you're going to believe most things that I heard people say it. I haven't researched it yet. I might as well believe it up until what the heck is this crap, right? So, that makes sense. Expat says, for example, you can tell it to respond with a low IQ, which is useful to appeal to a wider audience. Well, Diego actually is an example of that. So I was taught as a kid that the New York Times wrote to a third grade reading level. That's the 8-year-olds, because that's what you need to have for the majority of most anywhere but Americans, in the case of the New York Times, to be able to consume your newspaper. So if you want to make money, you cannot write to a high school level. And it's true. Go out and try this. Take things that would be, if you paid attention in middle school and high school, anybody should know. Not the specialty things, not that special class. The classes everybody is required to take, and things that should be common knowledge, and start asking people about them. And not only will people be completely unknowledgeable about them, they will be offended that you expected them to know something so specialty, and will be completely unaware of the fact that they were taught it and graded on it and probably wrote papers on it when they were younger. Oh my gosh, I hear a jet flying over. Can you guys hear that? I can't remember the last time I heard a jet flying over. Can you write down any updates on the canal? The Chinese still pursuing that. All right, Seeking Truth. I know you're a real person because we talk to you all the time. What brought that up? Because you're not the first person to ask it tonight. And it's like chemtrails. There has never been, there never will be Chinese pursuing a canal. And you said the same thing. Are they still pursuing it? Implying, same as the person who did before, that they pursued it in the past. Which, given that there's no canal, no Chinese involvement, both now or in neither have ever existed. What's prompting that question twice in one night? In the same way. Oh, Diego says, what is chemtrails? Chemtrails is a prank pulled on Americans, telling them that it's not a wake. It's called a what's the actual thing? They're actually pointing to something. Contrails. Contrails are real. They are the equivalent of the wake. So if you have a boat, and you may not know this, being in Nicaragua, there's very few boats. If you have a boat that goes fast enough with a motor, it creates a wake behind it. So it's where the water gets churned up from the motor, and gets air bubbles in it. And if you're looking from above, you can see where the boat has been for a few minutes or maybe a few hours. I don't know. And so big boats make big wakes. Small boats, like a canoe, won't leave one. But a speedboat can. In the air, you get the same effect from jet engines. You can get it from props as well. And what it is it's a combination of churning the air from the turbines, and the increased pressure with temperature change from the turbines creates the equivalent of a wake in the air. So behind a plane is a thing called a contrail that's just and it's as in condensation. It creates like a little rain cloud coming out of the engines, basically. But so there's this prank played on Americans. It's used as a marker to identify people who believe conspiracy theories, that the United States has paid all planes worldwide to pump mind control chemicals through the planes. And that even countries that are enemies of the United States, and even private planes that you could buy yourself, that somehow you will be involved in this, even if you did it, because it's 100% of planes do it, and it's the weirdest thing, absolutely bizarre. But that's the conspiracy theory, that every single person who's ever flown a plane has put mind control chemicals that are visible and come out the back of the plane. And imagine what it's like as an American to try to explain that to people outside the U.S., that this is a widespread, I don't want to say belief, but it is a widespread thing that people claim to believe. And tons of people, I mean so many people, comment about chemtrails on my channel because planes don't fly overhead in Nicaragua. So they look at my videos, because if you're looking at US videos, you'll see contrails all the time. You never get away from them in most places. But here, it's rare that you have a plane, so there's nothing to produce a contrail. And so people go, oh, finally a government that doesn't allow chemtrails. And it's like, so we just like to point out, hey, they're still there, right? Please don't come here. Like, I've just given up on being like, that's not a thing. It's instead, we're like, oh yes, no, they're just not in the shot. So I point them out sometimes. Seeking Truth says, thanks for the info on tech. Diego says, for the tech industry, I know of one company that is building a software as a service, Ray, that's the like Uber. Most of the other dev companies are dev shops. The rest are financial institutions. Most of the good devs work for companies abroad. Otman Strada says, most people who work in IT here in Cali have CIS degrees or business degrees. Cal Poly, where I went to school, offers CIS. Right, CIS is a development degree. It is, it depends. There's multiple CIS. Computer Information Systems can be an IT degree. Yep. Jan says, yeah, contrails is a physics thing and have been there since planes started flying at altitude. Yep, it's just cold air. But Seeking Truth, or anybody, what is going on abroad that there's talk of a canal here? Like, what? What is going on up there? This is so wild. And how do they get people to say, still pursuing it? How do they make it after so long? Because it's been 140 years. 140 years of there not being a canal and nothing happening with a canal and no talk of a canal in country. How do they convince people that it's such a thing when no one here has heard a thing? That's... Jen says, I hear a few planes, but not like every night, mostly at night. And there's one that's sort of loud whine. My son-in-law said that it's an older engine. He knows a lot about planes. Definitely older engines flying in here quite often. I'm just going to check on these photos I was uploading. Well, it looks like they're probably there. Let people know. What would you think it would be needed for Nicaragua to become a tech hub, Scott? That's a tough one. Really what's needed is serious government investment. That's critical. I think the opportunity is there for sure. But we have a few things that are lacking. We have a lack of government investment in a couple different ways. One is that the government is not using those resources, right? So the government's not hiring top IT talent. The government's not hiring top dev talent. The government's not working on world-class or even reasonable class IT systems for obvious reasons, right? They're just that's not a place that they're focused, and all those resources right now come from outside of the country. So to do so would be a very large investment in bringing in skills to do that stuff. But until they do that, the big employer, the government, is not doing those things. So are small employers going to do that? Maybe. But they can bring in a lot of those skills from the outside because those things are always able to be done remotely. So what's the incentive for, let's just say Flor de Caña, Cerveceria, someone else who's really big like that. What's their incentive to hire Nicaraguans? Well, looks good, easy. You can sit them in the office and know what they're doing, sure. But they're more costly than existing skills abroad. So just like the U.S. doesn't come looking to Nicaragua for those skills, as you know, they go looking in other places, Mexico, Bolivia, Argentina, places that already have well-established industries, places whose government long ago put in that investment and invested in the education infrastructure. And often are investing in data centers and other things to move physical infrastructure into the country as well, not just the internet infrastructure that Nicaragua is doing, which is fantastic, but other things that support that and contribute to that and provide more jobs. So those things are really needed, but it's tough to overcome the simplicity because neither software development nor IT, by definition, ever need to happen where it is, right? So the ability to simply hire from friendly countries that cost less or the same is pretty high. That's a big incentive. So why develop it here? So the only organization of merit within the country that has an interest in creating that industry is the government. They're the only ones who benefit from the creation of that industry. Because Flor de Caña doesn't benefit from that because at best it's a break even. Okay, now we can hire local instead of hiring remote. Nice, great. I'm not saying that they don't want to do that, but they can't make a $50 million investment to hope to do that, right? That would just be throwing money away for them, and that doesn't make sense. And so that's just not going to happen. The government is the one group that could possibly do it. And even, small universities, right? Private universities could be like, we're gonna make this happen and provide really good education for this, but they can't educate enough people because you don't just have to educate one field. You have to have the software engineers, you have to have the IT, and you have to have the business people who understand that, right? Just like if you didn't have business people who understood the value of lawyers and accountants, no one would hire lawyers and accountants. You have to teach people why you need them. Then when they have that knowledge, then make those people so you can hire them. They've done that. They need to do the same thing with IT. So does the U.S. in reality. So what would creating an IT industry here actually look like? Because I think it would be brilliant. One, they need to go to Unan. They need to go to La Salle. They need to go to Poly, the new one in Didiamba. They need to go to those and be prepared to put in both software engineering and IT programs, or CIS, right? Works fine. With deep skills. You can't do it shallow. You have to produce the mentors through that system, or you're going to have people coming out of those programs with nowhere to go and nothing to do, and chaos is going to reign because no one's going to be in a position to evaluate anybody. So you got to be really careful with that. These are difficult fields at the best of times. The average U.S. university can't even field a single IT professional from their ranks, their professors, their students, their IT departments, right? They're bad. So there's a lot here that needs to be done. But more importantly, they need to be going into the public school system and working with the private school systems. The privates will have the option to turn it down, but they need to encourage them and provide resources. But the public schools need to go deep on early education. This is something lacking in most countries. Early education and making, because we've got this amazing internet infrastructure. We've got the tools to do this. Let's get early education in, and it's a long process to create great IT. But if we start with the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, and we start really good early year education in IT and software engineering, we're going to have junior people coming out at age 13 to 16, which is exactly where we want them. Those people, we hope, will en masse not go to university. We need the government to come out and say, we are backing off on our pro-university stance and go for, we want results. Because we're no longer just using university as a unemployment buffer system. We want to create an industry. We want to create excellence. We want to make the US and China go, ooh, whoa, they can turn out some people. That can be done. And it can be done within 10 years. But it requires a government that is willing to back that and is willing to stand by. We're going to back off on some general programs we've had in place. It takes a lot to make that decision. It's very, very difficult. But a small country like Nicaragua could do it. So you start by getting these youths in. Then you have an opportunity to take those who are not ambitious enough or not good enough to just go out and work in their teens. And then you can go to the trade schools, of which we have several here, and put in programs there that can help get people up to speed for high-end bench work, for similar things where they do need more hand-holding, they do need more time, and we can get some benefits of the unemployment buffer, but get them into the field and be useful. Yes, they'll end up working for the people that didn't do that. That's what always happens, right? That is the expectation. Then with those things in place, we can put university programs in now that we have a base for finding professors and for evaluation. We can start to put that in place. But before we put that in place, we make the government make the call that they are going to go for software engineering and IT excellence within the government ranks to provide a vacuum, to suck up the people who are really good, the people who are looking for jobs, because the majority of those excellent people don't want to be entrepreneurs. And of those that want to be entrepreneurs, many of them don't have the opportunity to be entrepreneurs. They have no cash buffer. They just need a job. We don't want them leaving the IT or software engineering industries to go wait tables because, well, they got to feed their family and this is a quick answer. We need them going into government jobs, or we need the government pushing big companies to work with them, the Florida Cañas, the Cervecerias, companies like that. And they need to come to companies like mine and say, you guys have the ladders. You guys have the mentors. You guys can write the curriculums. We need to work with you guys to start hiring these jobs. And we need these workers to do your jobs. Because we would love to hire Nicaraguans. We don't, because they don't provide them. We would love to go to the high schools and talk to high school IT professors and be like, who do you got? Who do you got that's interested? Who do you got that's passionate? Who do you got that's you think could actually go do this work right now? And yeah, it would be few and far between. That's who we want to hire. And in fact, we do have a 16-year-old here that we're looking at. That's exactly who we want to hire, because then they get those, instead of years and years wasted in uni, we've got them where they can start learning real world environments from real professionals, and the pace at which they can excel is super high. We also have to see, and this is unfortunate, but a deep dedication to teaching English. You're not going to create a big software engineering culture arise if everyone's speaking Spanish. It's just not going to happen. My company, yes, 100% Spanish in engineering. We are the exception, not the rule. We make a point of it. And most of them speak English anyway, but we do all engineering in Spanish. That is not normal, right? If you want to be able to sell products abroad, you want to be able to work with companies all over the world, Spanish is not the answer. So that's something they need to push as well. So these things all go together, right? Elementary education, trade education. You have some delay, but you need university education. The government has to double down on this themselves. If they are not going to lead by example, no one's going to follow. And then once they start leading by example, then you work with the companies that are the low-hanging fruit, the big ones and the technical ones, the banks, all those, right? And try to get them to take these things seriously, right? And I work with some much larger countries in the region, and I can tell you, they don't take these things seriously. Even financial institutions, not even close, right? So it's very, very rare to see that stuff happening around. So pushing that broad enough that people come out and are like, ooh, I can go work for one place and then I could go work somewhere else. What if that place isn't good? Nobody wants to go for a degree where they're stuck working for just one entity. There's some careers that are just like that. You want to be a cop? Well, there aren't cop jobs that aren't for the government, right? Anywhere. So sometimes you're stuck with that. But in IT, you don't expect to have just one option. You expect to have many. And you need many because you need to move between places and learn things and gauge things. And so it's a really tough thing. But can it be done? Yeah. And if you know the right people and they're like, we don't know where to start, they can call me, right? I've led the programs at the largest university in the United States. I can teach anything in software engineering, anything in IT. I can run PhD programs. I have sat on the board overseeing these programs. I would love to spend my time doing that. That is something I'm very passionate about and think is very important. Sorry, I'm reading something in the background. Sorry, answering questions on a side note on that stuff. Okay, let's see. We can read physics thing. Few planes. What would we need for? So it takes a lot to become a tech hub. I think also adding like data centers. Things like that help too, right? And I don't see any business putting in a data center. It's very difficult to do. That stuff would help. The ability to easily run large-scale apps within the country, building direct connections to nearby countries, things like that would all help as well. Diego says, I know of many uni systems engineering graduates that can't code at all. That's practically expected, right? Working in the US, we totally expect, like, you went to uni? Why? If you could code, you wouldn't have gone to uni. That's not 100% true, but it's pretty true, says a person who went to uni. But I didn't go for coding. Diego says, I'd love to see a startup software industry here. For a startup industry, you really need investors. And that's a different thing. Now you're moving from tech hub into venture capital. And we did a video on this a while ago. It's very different animals. And I don't want to see that here. I want to see success. I want to see economic growth. I don't want to see a cannibalistic destruction of the rich and making isolated pockets of scammers rich. I want to see tech succeed. So having startup industry feels bad. You want a development industry. You want an engineering industry for survivability, for sustainability, for that century solution, not that flash in a pan thing like in the U.S. And did the startup industry help the U.S.? We don't have that proof, right? It made a high GDP, but you and I can make an app that just moves money back and forth to each other at an insanely fast rate, and we'll have a bigger GDP than the United States and not do a single damn thing. Do hostels have good internet? That's a question for the individual hostel. Can they? Yes. Did mine? Absolutely. Right. Internet here is fantastic, but like anywhere in the world, you're dependent on the person you're working with to have gotten that fantastic internet. Some place may not even get internet, right? If you don't check, why would they? Diego says Lafise is kind of starting that, hiring tons of engineers and pumping out apps. The new Lafise Digital and Pocket 100% Nika made. That's cool. Diego says hostels don't have good internet. Usually, carrier internet is good enough to work though. This carrier internet, Claro and Tigo. Diego says I don't see multiple dev companies prop up. That's what I meant. Seeking Truth says I guess we're misinformed from the outside looking in. Brian says I went for coding. They taught COBOL and Fortran. It was the what was used in Carolinas at the time. Couldn't code worth a crap. Went to business, but now back in IT. And when I went, it was Fortran as well. But I'm older. Definitely not COBOL though. Oh, but yeah. So I'm interested in Seeking Truth. Where are you hearing about the fake Chinese canal news? What source is it? Is it something we can trace back? COBOL is a dinosaur. My wife's aunt is a COBOL programmer. Has been for like 50 years, like literally. The U.S. military still uses it because they're a dinosaur. CMC Donald, greetings from Reno, Nevada. Brian says textiles and railroad. COBOL, some funny stuff. Oh, I was trying to look up. The question is, does LaSalle have programs for IT? Because people thought that they did. But what is LaSalle's website? LaSalle, Nicaragua. It is ULSP. ULSA, also. There we go. ULSA, Edu, and I, Carreras. Financial, Mercadeo, Vision, Cybernetica Electronica, Mechanical and Renewable Energy, Systems Control, Electromedia. What is Cybernetica Electronica? Education program. Okay. So LaSalle claims that they have a Cybernetica Electronica engineer, which is gibberish, and their picture of a person doing cybernetic electronics is a guy with an oscilloscope. Like, wow. Yeah, this is the kind of problems we're talking about, is that even the people running the program don't even know what the program's supposed to be. Yeah, no. There is most definitely no IT programs in Nicaragua. I think it's safe to say there's not a single IT program in the country. I would be so shocked. No one has ever told me of being able to take a single class anywhere. So, let's see, where are we? which is sad. But Diego says, "Oh, got it. I thought you meant some parts of. You can install COBOL on Linux if you want. Oh yeah, you can get COBOL easily. Isn't Linux C? Oh, you guys are jumping around. Hold on. COBOL is a dinosaur. Greetings from Reno. Textiles Road. COBOL is on Linux. I like COBOL. Isn't Linux C? Yes, but you can install COBOL on Linux if you want. Oh, got it. I thought you meant some parts of the kernel were written in COBOL. That doesn't even work. It doesn't compile to machine compatible code. I got a friend making the big bucks here doing black screen coding and DB2. It's some mainframe system. If it's a DB2, it is. I guarantee it's not a mainframe system. It is a mini computer. DB2 only runs on minis. I don't believe DB2 is available on a mainframe. Yeah, so that is that. You say black screen coding. I think you mean green screen coding is the English term for that. But yeah, it's probably on what we used to call an AS400. What the heck are they called now? My gosh. What are they called now? My gosh. IBM Power System. I think they're just called IBM Power System now. And that was a long time ago. Released in 1988. He says it's for a bank. Bank? I've never heard of a bank using a mainframe. That would be pretty wild. Do they still make mainframes? I actually haven't looked in a while. I'm sure IBM does. Just they make such weird stuff. Oh my gosh. They have AI on their mainframe. Oh, IBM. The stuff they make. How is IBM still in business? Who buys this crap? My gosh. And I worked there, right? I'm from IBM. They have a new processor family that's so unimportant, no one has talked about it. It's so wild that IBM makes custom chips for their mainframes. Who buys mainframes? I did survive IBM. Yes, you worked there, but it was a while ago. It was a while ago. It's been 26 years. Well, 25 from when I left. And they haven't made any new products in all that time. Their products were terrible at the time. And one of the things that was really interesting about working at IBM is you were not allowed to use IBM products at IBM because IBM didn't believe in them. They said they couldn't get support. The products were made poorly. They bought everything from Sun, which is now Oracle. They would not buy them from Oracle, I guarantee, but from Sun, they definitely they were the best, right? So IBM stood by Sun as being the best in the industry, and that's what we ran on, which was nice that we were able to use best of industry and everything. But it was very sad to work at the company that was flat out like, our products are garbage. They inside IBM, it was just like, who would buy this stuff? Who would do business with us? Our customers are idiots. I do have some stories from there for sure. It's got C++ compilers can compile C code. Is that a question? What? Some C++ compilers can compile C. That is true. Most C compilers can also compile COBOL and Fortran. So what's the... where are you going with that? What is the point of the statement? I'm lost. The biggest compiler for C, for those who are interested, natively compiles C, C++, Objective-C, Fortran, Ada, Go, D, Modula 2, and COBOL. Ooh, but in 2025, just a few weeks ago, they added Algo 60. Algo 68. Not seen anything compile that in a really long time. But it's nice that Fortran and COBOL, Modula 2, all the Cs, they can all be compiled on the same compiler, so your output is like identical. If you know C language, you know C++ is what I'm trying to chat about. Oh, well, that's not actually true. So I taught C, and C++ is quite different. It's meant to be a crossover, but GCC. But they are different languages. You actually have to learn them, right? Now, the idea of C++ was to extend the language and give C programmers additional stuff, but it is technically a different language. Like it's got different capabilities. If you know C and use a C++ compiler, you've actually just written C. G++ is C++, but GCC is for C++. Like, I just was on the GCC website to verify it. I don't think G++ exists anymore. CMC Donald, what is Linux? Linux is the world's largest operating system by far. Yes. I have 23 minutes. I'm okay. Thank you. Linux is the main operating system for the world. It's what Android is built off of. It's what nearly all servers are built off of. It's what Chromebooks are built off of. It is for the majority of things, it's the only real competitor to Windows and Mac, or it should be said, Windows and Mac are the sad competitors with Linux. The thing that's different is technically, and this is where people get lost, and this is the biggest problem with Linux. Linux is the kernel, and operating systems are built on it. So Android is a Linux-based operating system. Chrome OS is a Linux-based operating system. Ubuntu is a Linux-based operating system. Fedora is, CentOS is, RHEL is, and so forth. So there's tons of independent operating systems, but they are but they're all Linux under the hood. The difference is Windows kernel is called Windows NT. So people just refer to it as Windows, and it seems like that's the thing, right? If you if you go with Mac, its kernel is called the mock kernel. And so people just ignore it because nothing uses the mock kernel except for macOS. You could use it for a project, but no one does. And so those operating systems, they ignore their kernel. But because Linux operating systems, you have control of the kernel ability to modify things. People have a tendency to refer to the fact that it's Linux, which is kind of weird and super confusing for people, unfortunately. But the Linux family of operating systems, which are not necessarily mutually compatible, is by far the dominant one and by far the most advanced. And so it's beneficial in a lot of ways. Seeking Truth says PHP with Laravel is good for freelance. We used to do that internally. We've moved completely off. We're like, it just doesn't cut it anymore. But it was good. We liked it. I'm trying to... So the thing about GCC and G++ is that G++ is part of GCC because GCC is the collection of compilers. And it includes the ones for C and C++. But it's also true that if you write C for G++, it's still C, it's not C++, just because you're compiling with it. Does that make sense? It's like, if you don't take advantage of the additional extensions, it's still the old language. And it's only mostly a superset. It also includes Ada. Yes, Ada is included. Expats says Linux does not get computer viruses, saves a lot of money. Saves a lot of money for a lot of reasons. Viruses is a pretty minor one. In reality, Windows doesn't get viruses anymore either, unless you're really foolish. But it is true. Like, we don't run antivirus on Linux. No one makes one. Not really, because there's no purpose. In reality, same on Mac. So that would give you the feeling that Mac also saves you money, and it does versus Windows. Windows is an interesting one because most people use the thing that makes no sense. Windows is the slowest, buggiest, hardest to use, least user-friendly, and most likely to have security problems like viruses of all options. So when you look at other options that make sense, viewing them through the lens of, well, how do they compare to the one thing that doesn't make sense is really hard. Because outside of, I have an application like a video game that doesn't support anything except for Windows, there's no reason to use Windows. And I mean, there is no reason to use Windows. It's trash, and only gotten worse, right? It is the equivalent of AI slop for IT. Right? It's really bad. And not to pick on Windows or Microsoft, because they've made good products in the past. It's not that they can't. So Windows isn't one of them. And it's not their market. And they've made a point of saying it's not their market, right? It's a really bizarre situation that so many people use such a terrible option. And it's the only one you have to pay for. So, like, the concept of, well, Linux is cheaper, it is, but the idea that you pay anything is so weird. On Mac, the operating system is free as long as you have Mac hardware. I realize that's still not free, but it's, right, there's no cost associated with Mac OS at the very least. It is true. Not tech workers prefer Windows. Tech businesses prefer Windows because it breaks so they can make money. And that is true. If you hire someone who's not a professional, you hire a salesman and listen to salesman recommendations, they will sell you Windows because Microsoft gives them a kickback for giving you intentionally bad advice. And you then have tons of potential work. Same reason that they sell Cisco, same reason that they sell SonicWall. There's a ton of products like that. We call them reseller products. They're intentionally bad products with tons of marketing, and that we call the airport marketing, where they target the dumbest people in management to convince them that they should be tricked by salespeople, and it works incredibly well. CMC Donald says, so what would you use if not Windows? Thank you for discussing about Linux. Well, I would use Linux. It should always be, your default should always be what's good. And Linux is the default, right? It is the cheapest, the most broadly available. It's the best in the general sense, right? Are there times that other things are better? Yes, but in the general sense, Linux is the best. So which specific flavor of Linux, as we often call it, that you would pick would be based on your circumstance, right? There are times that Chromos, times that Android, times that Ubuntu. My company runs on Ubuntu, with the exception of those of us who specifically need macOS for certain things. And sometimes that's software compatibility is a driving factor, and those of us who need the macOS or the Mac hardware. Let me tell you, bouncing back and forth, the degree to which Ubuntu Linux is superior to macOS is staggering, right? It's not a close thing. It's so much friendlier. It is so much more stable. It is so much easier to use, so much more powerful. But but macOS is still worlds better than Windows, cheaper, safer, more stable. And more secure, right? Well, I guess that's safer. But so much easier to use Linux. Like, things are just so nothing. Once you use Linux, the actual hardest thing, as someone who has worked with companies to move people to Linux over the years, one of the biggest things is teaching people not to bring all their Windows problems with them. For example, people are constantly like, well, where do I find this software? How do I go to a website, buy this software, bring this stuff down, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, none of that is stuff you have to do. Those are all Windows problems, or at least in the majority of cases. And they're like, I don't understand. We're like, you don't need anything. Everything you need is built in. Everything. Well, how do I maintain it? You don't. Everything is self-maintained. What about updates? Everything is updated, right? It's like all these things. Well, how do I get antivirus? You don't need one. Stop talking to salespeople. Stop trying to come up with extra work. Stop assuming things don't work. Stop assuming things are bad. Stop assuming there's a gap. And suddenly it's like, wait, what if it was like the best case scenario? So what if it was free, safe, everything I needed was included, and everything just worked? That seems like, oh my gosh, that's what everyone uses who knows? Oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? But that's what it's like. Now, is it everything's included? No. That video game you really wanted to buy, yeah, you still got to get that. That one bit of software your company makes, yes, you have to still use that. But in advanced companies like ours, literally, we don't need any software. Either we build it ourselves or it's in the operating system. That's it. And we're talking everything from desktops to servers, right? Our giant servers in the cloud, everything is built into the operating system. We don't have to go, we configure it, right? But it's like, well, what if I need enterprise class databases? Well, where do you think they go? They come with Linux, right? Your Linux, right? In our case, Ubuntu or Debian or Fedora or whatever, any one of them. So it's wild. Diego says, I have to use Google Cloud products for the company I work for, and I have to use it for clients. Drives me crazy. But at least those are native to Linux. But yeah, I hate the Google Cloud products. They're terrible. But yeah, especially for travelers, right? For expats, having an operating system that's easier to use, easier to maintain, never have to worry about licensing, never have to worry about buying it, never having to worry about if your updates are going to be supported, blah, blah, blah. those things actually matter. Initially, it's like, oh, I have to learn something new. Yeah. But it's good stuff that you should have done anyway. You just didn't know, or didn't have the time, or didn't have the trigger to cause you to put in the effort. But when you're oh, sorry, I got to go hand money to someone. I will be back in just... Actually, no, we're going to call it a night. I'm sorry that we're in the middle of stuff, but I have to go give money to someone. I have 12 minutes to do my Duolingo, and my kids are waiting for me to assemble a fountain. I'm going to be talking soon about the new thing that we just bought today, because it's very exciting, but it's not super... you're not going to be like, whoa, that's the coolest thing. But it's fun for me and my kids. Let's just put it that way. Thank you so much, everyone, for being on tonight. Sorry to suddenly end so abruptly, but I need to. We're over 300 views on a Sunday night. Not too shabby. Not the 1,000 plus we had yesterday, but great to have everybody here. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for not being terrible people and leaving just because we were doing good things. I appreciate all of you. Have a good night. Remember to join the community if you can. Hop on, buy me a coffee, get in the show notes, say hello, all those things. Tell someone about the show. I get so many issues with the audio when I was running Ubuntu. That's weird. I get the weird audio issues with Mac. It's Ubuntu that fixes it for me. My Mac is the worst audio I've ever had to deal with. Other than that, it's pretty good. The audio is specifically bad on my Mac for me. And I will see all of you tomorrow.